last year, Michael was on the program, Michael Moschen.
Okay, great.
And just before the meeting, he had an illness and couldn't come, and I was destroyed because I was so many people were looking forward to him coming. People were calling me and saying, I don't know what TED is, but I'm coming because Michael Moschen is going to be there. Well, I don't know if you've ever seen the PBS special on him, but he's the most remarkably gifted sort of, it's ballet, it's juggling, it's Michael Moschen.
Can I start?
You can go.
Thanks. Thanks a lot for having me. As he said, I couldn't come last year for various reasons, and it's really great to be here. And I'm just entranced by all the other speakers and what's going on here. The one thing I should say up front is that juggling isn't brain surgery. But I also have to say that this time of the morning it feels like it. What I do is I work with my body and I work with objects. I'm going to show you a little bit live. I'm going to show you a little bit on video and a little bit on slides. Now, I would say that I'm 1 or 2 tiers below what you just saw as far as high tech, as far as my slides and video and things, but just bear with me. I like to work in a very simple way. And a lot of what I try to do is to get at some very underlying principles of how we all go through our days and how we feel in control or out of control with objects and with the psychology behind it and a lot of other things. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a little bit live, show some video of some pieces that I've done that are based on investigations that I like to pursue. I look at a juggler as being the controller and wears many different hats. The controller can be the scientist, the controller can be the doctor, he can be the high priest, he can be many different things. He can be the dad, he can be all different kinds of roles. In each piece that I make, I try to find what it is. I don't start off with an idea that this is what I want this character in this piece to be. I let it emerge, or I hopefully let it emerge through the investigations that I go through. If you talk to anybody in my field that is juggling, I think what I might be known for is that I create new techniques. That is, I've done a great deal of history into great deal of research into the history of juggling, and I know a lot about what excellent jugglers there have been that have done great things. One of the things about juggling that you may not know and probably don't know is that juggling often reflects the time period. In times of war, there are cannonball jugglers and cannon jugglers, and I heard a story here a couple days ago of somebody talking about some architecture over in England about them planting trees to make sure that they would have the rafters for that particular structure in a number of 100 years. Well, juggling does have some very deep traditions. I won't say it quite as comparable, but in China, if you see a porcelain jar juggler, he is taken, when he finishes his training, and he's taken to the museum where he's given his porcelain jar, and he will use that for his lifetime, and then it'll go back to the museum. It's sort of a lend-lease program, and they have a very long tradition of teaching very high-level circus arts. Anyway, so the first thing I want to do is show you a little bit about what normal juggling is. Anyway, so that's sort of normal juggling. And normally when well, as normal as jugglers get. Normally I perform that with music, but I decided not to do it because I wanted to strip away so you didn't have anything between the balls and you. Part of what I try to do is set up, I've heard a lot about story here. Well, I guess, again, I'm a little odd in that I look to try to find the story in an object. And I probably could have been institutionalized long ago if people really saw me in my day-to-day life. I look at objects in a way that has potential. And, okay, let me just describe one thing. At the very beginning, what I tried to do, and because I have a collar on, the ball didn't work, I'm going to show you the beginning again. Yep, try this again. Now, what happens there, you don't know really, but the dynamics of it are, just so you understand how I work on story. I present something, I take it away, I give it back, activate it, then I'm human. So I've set up a storyline already in a very few moves of trying to get so that you would be interested in what's going on. If I simply come out like I've seen a lot of jugglers come out and start with 4, 5, 6, 7, something like that, I've got nowhere to go. And for me, the fun is going somewhere. Anyway, so let me just show you some other stuff. And with juggling, you can break it down in a lot of different categories. There's balancing, there's tossing, there's manipulating objects. And I've tried a lot of different kinds of juggling. One of the things I like to do is to work in that body area, around my body, and try to find a new way of working with an object. So with the balls, one of the things that I found, and if you can cover this stuff with my feet, I'm going to try to find a solid part of the floor here. I became interested in tap dancing a while ago. And I'm frustrated at a lot of things. That is, I don't do one thing because I want to be that. I do it so I can learn about it enough so I can take it into the process and try to do something with it. So let me just show you a little bit of this. Okay? The floor. Now again, that's still working with balls in a sort of a normalcy or a normal way, but combining it with dance in a way that, for me, is fun. And what I've tried to do is make it so it's almost like visual music, so that you have spatial awareness with where the beats are coming, and I'm trying to expand on that. Now that's the segue into the first videotape, if you can be ready for me. I do a piece inside a 10-foot triangle, an equilateral triangle, and what I'm going to do is show you 3 parts of it. The first part is the very beginning when I discover the triangle. And as I said, the juggler can be many different things. In this piece, I'm discovering the space. I've wandered into a museum, and I've discovered this triangle that's very pleasing. So I'm just going to show you the opening moments of that, of discovering the outside of the triangle and the inside of the triangle, and then I'll jump to where the juggler goes with it. Okay, can you run the first video, please? All right, thanks. You can cut it off there. All right. So anyway, the triangle has been discovered, and for me, I don't know why, it's my background. My grandfather was an engineer, and my other grandfather was a stonemason. I love shapes. I love to investigate them, to figure out the weight, what's involved with it. If we can run the second one, which is 3 balls in the triangle, this juggler then discovers the angles and figures out he can do some stuff. What really I love about this triangle piece is that it started out being an investigation for me of how wedges hold doors open. I don't work by thinking this would be a great piece and then make a technique for it. I work with study objects and figure out how do they work together, what's their personality, what are they saying. And the triangle emerged finally from standing these wedges up, leaning them together, and finally I threw a marble in there or something and it made a noise and I went, uh-oh. And then I built a triangle, put it in there. And I don't know if in your work you find the same thing, but what I find is that when something finally, all the work that I've done before comes together and the path is there, it may be a very long path and a very difficult path, that's when it gets very emotional for me. When it crystallizes and I know what's there and what I have to apply myself to. And the triangle piece took about 4 years to develop. But I knew once I had a ball rattling around a little triangle, I said, oh shit, here we go. This is another, how many years of my life now on this piece? Because once it's there, you can't not make it. Anyway, let's show the 3 balls in the triangle. Thanks. You can cut off the video. Anyway, thanks. I would have loved to have the triangle here, but we didn't really have enough tech time to do it and everything. It's also a lot safer for me to do it that way. And that comes into it, believe me, when you do this kind of stuff live night after night. What I'm going to do is show you, if you can keep the tape there, and then we'll let it run. The next part about this piece that I discovered in making the piece was that though I love simplicity, I love working with a single object or working in a reductionist way to find out the absolute essential of working with an object, I also am addicted to complexity if it is generated out of that simplicity. And what I found is that I was drawn to figuring out if I could work with more balls in the triangle than just 3. Because this triangle's 3 feet deep. At the first year, I couldn't keep the balls in the triangle one way or the other. They were flying out in all directions. I mean, I was wearing an athletics cup, and I mean, it just was... but then I finally figured out the technique of how to put the spin on the balls and how to throw the balls. So what I'm going to show you is taking the complexity of working in the triangle, taking it to a point where I found that I pushed my body and my brain to the limit within this technique, which is 5 balls in the triangle, so that, and just to explain what's going on, the balls are ricocheting, hitting the bottom, the side, the bottom, and then back. What's interesting about this technique is that in juggling, normally you have hand-eye coordination. I can look at an audience, I can still see out of the peripheral here. Normally in juggling, I try to keep my hands low because I have more time then. In this, I realized that I had to put my hands high, and what I had to do was remember the path of each ball as it left my hand, because that's how jugglers work. We see it with our hands, and we touch it with our eyes. So by throwing it, I knew it's short, it's to the left, okay, follow that. Now, if you want to follow 5 balls consecutively in a pattern, it's short, and you've got to remember that all the way around because it's changing the angle, and then you've got to get rid of it because you've already made 4 other throws. It's cool. It's a lot of fun. You know? So what I'm going to show you is the 5 balls in the triangle, and then I'm going to go, I wanted to take complexity to a dramatic turn, and you'll see the next thing that follows it was my sort of, having never owned a business suit, It was my sort of homage to business suits for some reason. So if we can see the video. All right, thanks. You can cut the video there. Oh, come on. Now, I feel like I've been privy to so many inside things, but with your groans, you're forgetting the first rule of show business, which is leave them asking for more. I mean, come on. Anyway. That whole thing, the double disc or the column piece, grew out of my fascination with architecture and with how balls can move in a way that you wouldn't think they can move. And what's happening there really is that I'm throwing the balls with underspin, and because they have such a good grip, they're silicone balls, they hit the plexiglass surface, reverse spin, then reverse spin on the steel, reverse again, and they can come back. If you try it with a billiard ball, you're going to break a lot of windows on the other side. And that's something that I discovered just walking along the streets of New York City. I don't live in New York anymore, but a lot of my best ideas came just walking around looking at things in New York City. All right, so we've dealt with simplicity and complexity. Let me just see. Okay, I'm going to quickly go through these slides, and they're really low tech, so bear with me. And they're also really simple, but again, it's the way I like to look at things. I call them sphere stories. That is, different kinds of spheres that I shoot photographically for my own purposes. So if you want to take the lights down, and I'll try it. Okay? Pretty obvious. This is interesting because this is a whole story that unfolded when I was doing some carpentry in my backyard. I turned over a board, a couple of boards, and there was a wasp. And the nests, they like to build them in the shady area. Well, the wasp, the sun hit it, and immediately the eggs started heating up, so this wasp started just going crazy with the wings, trying to cool off the eggs. So I turned the board over and turned it back, and it was just, we had an interesting little thing going on. Now here's a spider, the same thing. I turned over another board, and there's a spider rolling with an egg sac, and this spider did a great job of rolling that sac, let me tell you, all the way across the board. And then it finally had to give up because it was too hot. And then I just moved it around the corner. Barnacles. Hello? Can you advance it? Yeah, there we go. Obviously, different kinds of spheres. Potential and realized. This is something that I did. There was a great fall colors a while back, about 4 or 5 years ago, and I was living in Westchester. And again, I could have easily been institutionalized. I bought the fall color balls, put them out around all the trees, and stacked them. As the leaves were falling, then I started kicking the balls into the trees. I was just trying to find something with it. This is just, again, fascination with architecture and reliefs that have existed for a long time. And pretty obvious. So wherever I go, I try to find. This is an interesting one where my dog loves to fetch, so I decided to do a little ball study with the dog. Her name's Rosie. She's a wonderfully friendly German Shepherd, but she's got great teeth. And so I kept throwing the ball on the other side of this ball, and she kept bringing it back until there was hardly a ball left. This, I just happened to find a porcelain doll in a friend's house and decided to put a scene together. This is one of those wind-blowing things this one took all day to make, to drill out each one so the balls could sit and then you could see the color change. This was just fascination with the full moon. The yellow ball on the bottom is on a track that would roll back and forth and take a long time coming to a stop. And this was an extension of that where I'd take and made all the tracks and put ball bearings on it. I don't have a video of it, but it makes a great sound. If you release, all of the ramps are on a different pitch, you release a straight line, you get just a wonderfully emanating curve that it's just great. And that I did with clear balls. It's just one of the studies that I have in the woods all around where I live. And then the weather comes. That's the end of the experiment with the snow. All right, could I have the lights again? Thanks. So those are just simple sphere studies that I do, and I have a big collection of different kinds that I pursue. One of the things I'm going to show you now is the work I do with crystal balls. And what I'm going to do is they can, yeah, just shoot me. Not literally, of course. I'm going to show you a little bit. I became fascinated with crystal balls in a window in a store years and years and years ago. And one of the things that I do that I think is different than a lot of people in my field is I set up rules that I don't break. And they're instinctive rules about something. And what I did with this was I set up a rule. Because the crystal ball was so beautiful, I realized that one of the issues with performing my kind of work, and one of the issues I felt with the world, was the exhibition of the sense of touch. That the sense of touch was not something that was utilized very strongly in a broad spectrum. And what I tried to do was use what had been going on in my own life, that is with a member of my family who was diagnosed with a very dangerous physical thing and was possibly going to die. And we went through that process. I was there with her. And it became apparent to me that the imagery of working with a crystal ball was certainly the imagery that had a lot to do with the feelings that were going around with what was going on. And so what I did was I made a rule that I would not close my hand around the ball. And I wanted to see if I could make a technique. And that took a long time to figure out that it was possible to move an object without looking like you had control of the object. So I went on to develop work, and I want to show you this one video, but I want to show you this first. I've seen a couple of really young'uns around, a couple weeks old, and something happened to me with this technique that was related to that, which is that giving birth, having our daughter born a number of years ago, she's 7.5, I was so impressed with the whole procedure from my wife getting pregnant and the shape change. If you can imagine a juggler with a wonderful, you know. But I was good. But one of the things that I did that happened after she was born, where it sort of kicked back into time, which I was so impressed with the whole visuals and dynamic of a woman giving birth, and realizing us guys are sort of left out in the cold. We can't really go feel it, and, you know, in a lot of ways. But my wife happened to be sitting nursing our daughter on the couch, and I was working with the crystal balls, and I happened to do something in response. Literally, I looked over at her, and a new technique happened that I had never done before. And again, it was one of those moments, those oh shit moments that, uh-oh, here's another 2 years of my life that I have to go after this, which was I had learned how to work with balls in my hand this way, and I even learned how to work with 3, okay? But what happened was, when I looked at her and then I went back to my work, all of a sudden something happened, which was that. 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 Not quite as smooth as that. And then what I realized, and again, this is the emotional content of the work, as far as I'm concerned, when you find extreme simplicity, what I found was that that's the perfect image of what a child does to a marriage. That what a child does is adds a dimension and adds beauty to what the activity is. And I just put the balls down, went off, and I just said, okay, this is hard. This is really hard, because these kinds of discoveries, and that's the way I look at it, these kinds of discoveries only happen if you put in all the homework, all that drudgery of working on something. So I went after it and tried to figure out ways of doing it. Anyway, that led to, and I want to just show you just a little bit of the technique live, and then working with 4, which this had nothing to do with emotion. This was pure physics. I didn't think this was possible, because what's happening here is these 3 balls want to go in all 3 different directions. This one's pushing down. These 3 are revolving. This one is revolving real fast, okay? And so what's happening is you got a stable structure that's constantly unstable that's being held together. That's the only way I can put it. Anyway, so what I want to do is show you the beginning of the piece that this is the reasoning behind. When I made the PBS show 5 or 6 years ago, this gets into interesting politics and art, I knew right away when this technique happened that in the PBS show, because I just made the contract for it, that I had to do this piece the way it was. That is, it had to be an homage to the birth of our daughter, period. And nobody was going to tell me anything else. Well, if you can imagine that a juggler gets a 1-hour show and great performance as PBS, it's a pretty difficult thing for a lot of arts people to swallow. And I won't go into how the piece happened, but I knew what I wanted to do. Well, PBS at that time was fighting a lot of censorship, or the impending censorship through their budget cuts and things. Well, when they saw what I gave them for this choreography, they said, and they just came to me, the head people just said, we got to put some clothes on you, you know. And I said, no, this piece has to be done the way it's got to be done. So if we can go to the crystal ball video, I think that's the next one. Okay, that's enough. Thanks. I don't want to show the whole thing. Thanks. Anyway, that piece goes on, and I work with 8 and 7, and I release them 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. And that's kind of a different proposition than most jugglers use. That is, in this piece, wanted to go from complexity to extreme simplicity. And in juggling, a lot of times you don't do that. The next thing I want to show you is, have any of you ever seen a group called Cirque du Soleil? Yeah. Well, Cirque du Soleil had called me, and they were building a big theater in Las Vegas at the Mirage, and they asked if I wanted to make a piece for them. And I want to quickly go through this stuff and show you how I came about it with a technique. I became fascinated with, let me make sure the slides are in the order I need them. Okay. Yeah. I became fascinated with the time period. They said the show takes place in ancient Greece. I'm a junk collector, I'll admit, and I happened to buy some floor tiles at a lawn sale, and it was wintertime, and I took the tiles out, and I realized that they were very rigid. They were sitting on my porch. I put them in the bathtub, put them in hot water, and I started bending shapes, and I bent really nice wave shapes, and I said, this is cool, I like this. Then I started working with balls to figure out how balls move. And I said, wave shapes, balls. Okay, let's start floating balls and see what's what. So let me just show you some of the studies I went through to develop a technique, which I'll show you the video of the technique as I do it, not as they did it in the show. Okay? Okay. So if we can go to the next slides. Ball on water, pretty simple. Light, yeah, you can take these lights down. Juggler with ball, this is a good friend, Chris Christensen, with a ball on his head. You can take these lights all the way out. The relationship to the head is pretty obvious. The sphere is gone. Then these are the small models of the shapes that I started bending as wave shapes. Did all sorts of photo studies of them to try to find the personality of these shapes. Then I finally bent, this shape was bent over my living room couch. It's a piece of aluminum, and put the ball with it, painted it. And now what I did was I came up with an image. After doing all this work, I came up with an image that I felt was the appropriate image for what I wanted to try to do. And I had no technique here yet. What I decided as the storyline was this, that imagine you're in ancient Greece. Nobody knows if the world is round or flat. And your lover goes off on a sailing ship and gets smaller and smaller and smaller and disappears into a point, then is gone. That moment, what's it like for the person on the land? So I used that to guide me to try to make a technique. So I started putting the ball all over the shape. This was quite an adventure, cutting all these holes in this aluminum shape. And then I started studying the armor of ancient Greece and started cutting out eye holes and looking at ships. And then I started making screen studies, models. And studying how they want to move, or how they may look like they want to move. This is great because this is on my pond in the backyard. This is the most useless kind of sails you could make out of screen. But there's something really poetic about it. There's something really nice about it. And then I started splitting waves. Imagine if you took one wave and split it by color, layer by layer. Okay, so you can cut those. What I want to do is go right to the video, the ball and shape video, ball and wave shape. Now this was, I put this piece together for myself and then developed a technique for them, for the three guys that I trained. But what I decided was I wanted to have the ball roll along the wave shape, half on and half off, along the edge. That felt like it fit the image. So if we can run that VHS video. Take these lights out, please. Oh, it wasn't queued up? Oh, or is it? Oh, okay, it is. Good. All right, thanks. Anyway. Now, as I said, it's pretty low tech. That was shot in my basement with a really ratty VHS camera. But I have a lot of those tapes around of different pieces that I work on. How am I doing on time? Okay, all right. Anyway, the whole idea behind making that piece or making that technique You see, in juggling, there's a hierarchy. If you can handle the object itself, it's a lot easier than after you have to handle another object to handle that object. So the ball in that one, we all have our problems. Well, the problem with that technique is it just rips your shoulders to pieces because it's all about balance. That ball is balanced the entire time. And it's also doing something that, again, I love to try to do something that I don't think is possible. I've never really seen a ball roll uphill before, you know? And it's not really doing that, but because I'm moving the bottom shape just at the right time. And for me, it's one of those shapes. I still don't perform that piece because I saw what I put the other guys through at Cirque du Soleil, the pain that they went through to learn it, that I sort of say, hey, you know, I'll get to it at some point. Anyway, the last thing I want to do is show you, okay, quickly the slides. Studying circles. I went to Florence with my wife. We looked at a lot of art. I looked at a lot of knockers. Now, for me, there's a whole piece there. In fact, there's 3 pieces. And that's what happened. I developed 3 different pieces. One piece based on a small circle dance, another piece based on a gyroscope, and the third, which was the S-curves. Now, could we have the last video, the S-curves video? Because the progression from a simple circle through those, you can just run that S-curve video whenever. This was taking a circle, splitting it in half, twisting it 180 degrees, and coming up with an S-curve shape. Whenever you want to run that video, that's fine. Anyway.
You had a sequence, they have to queue it up.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, it should be queued up. It's just the right video. Okay. Anyway, this dance was very much a primal exploration of one of the aspects of a circle broken. Okay? And there's sound. You can take this down, these lights down. All right, thanks. Thanks. So just to summarize, I love geometry, and I love trying to find something really simple in shape. And the physics of it are interesting. But usually what's interesting for me is finding that particular way of approaching an object, or handling an object, or moving an object that is particular to that object, and particular to developing a technique that can then be a language and express something in choreography or whatever else. Anyway, thanks for having me, and see ya.
Thank you so much for coming. Really, thank you.